This is Andrew Hada from Nothing Ventured Media. I want to tell you about all the feature films we've made and how you can see them right now. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one's a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. The documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, A Family of Fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Finally, The Empty Space, winner of multiple awards, including the Sacramento Horror Film Festival's Best of the Fest, is a cosmic horror about Amy Andrews, who's dealing with anxiety and depression after a violent attack that killed her husband. As she tries to find herself, she starts to lose her grasp on reality. Or could it be something much more sinister? The Empty Space is full of twists and turns, with Grace DeWilder of Rue Morgue magazine calling it a powerful film full of excellent performances by practically every cast member. All of Andrew Hada's movies are available to rent or buy on streaming services such as Tubi, Amazon, and many other places. And if that's not enough for you, Hada Films is home to all of our short films. So take a look around and see what you like. Spend your day with Hada Films and Nothing Ventured Media. Now, let's start the bomb squad. Welcome to the podcast. We're sponsored today by Movie Madness, where you can find three of my films. The last one's Borderland and The Empty Space, of course. Also, the last one's is there, and Borderlands is there. I just didn't think of the poster pointing thing until the end. But anyway, go check them out. We're not actually sponsored by Movie Madness, but we can be Movie Madness if you want us to be. That was just what what we like
We're
to
sponsored
call
by
satire.
liking Movie Madness.
And speaking of satire,
Speaking of failed satire,
welcome to 2025 on the Bomb Squad. Of course, we're going to have our end of the year list, but we still got to catch a few strays, as they say on Letterboxd. And so we're bringing that too. But so today we're starting with the William pick. William, starting off the year, we'll find out if it was strong or weak based on his movie.
Oh
But
no!
today he picked our first NC-17
Groundhog
film.
movie.
So if you're under 17, get out of this
Yes.
podcast because we're going to get very dirty.
Yeah,
But the
not for you.
1992 film Man Bites Dog. And I feel like William specifically picked this because of the names and having me pronounce them, but let's give it a try. Starring and written and directed by
Yes, yeah.
Remy
We can all try.
Bellevue,
Andre Bonzel, and Benoit Poelvoorde.
not even. You added like 50
Paul
syllables.
Vorde?
It's
to
Paul-
that.
there.
Paul
It's there.
Verde.
Benoit.
I love the name Benoit.
The most French.
That's so...
The most
What's
French
that movie
name.
with...
Yeah.
What's that Ryan Johnson movie?
Knives Out. That's how I knew Benoit.
Yeah.
Benoit and Remy.
Yeah.
You can't say those names without French.
Hello.
French
You're gonna make it Cajun.
accents. But
Yeah.
Josh, since you love
Just daring
movies,
you,
it
yeah.
looks like you got a little movie madness going on. So why don't you tell us
Oh
what
man!
this movie? Why don't you madness this movie is about?
Actually, this one's pretty straightforward.
Hell yeah.
This guy Ben is a French, or I guess
Yeah.
Belgian. I guess they speak French.
Okay, don't
in
call him
Belgium.
Ben. You have to call him Benoit.
Yeah.
Well, they call him
Oh,
Ben
no.
the whole movie. They're like, "Hey Ben."
They're like, hey Ben, you want some crepes?
Oh,
He's a
yeah.
serial
It sounds like I didn't
killer.
watch this movie, but I
Ben.
did. That's
Yeah.
all I know about French people.
he's a serial killer, and a documentary
We're
crew's
gonna learn.
following him for whatever reason. And as the documentary goes on, they become less passive observers and more active participants in his many crimes.
Yes. Yes. And I will say that this
Chaos.
movie,
Yeah.
it's hard to tell whether it did good or bad, but I noticed that there's not a lot of reviews of it. That's why I wanted to cover it. I think this year we're also going to add in movies that don't have a lot of reviews, and a lot of these kind of, especially like horror staples, like Man Bites Dog is one of those movies that they say it's like on the list of movies to see before you die. You know, it's a staple of not only found footage but horror and independent film. It took them years to make it, and they had to like stop halfway through and get funds and stuff. Yeah,
just total classic indie film story from like the early 90s.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
The Clerks of
Yeah.
horror in a way. Yeah,
and it's hard
just,
to
like,
find reviews
scraping
of this
together
film. I
whatever you
think
can.
it's because it's from 1992. So it's always hard with the internet and the dead internet to find old reviews. So we wanted to kind of cover, or that's why I wanted to cover it. But William picked it. So William, why did you want to cover it?
Well, I did see this in college, like a long, long time ago, and I remember liking it a lot. And I don't know, we always kind of expressed interest, like doing it on the show. But as far as like why I wanted to watch it, I just kind of wanted to rewatch it just for my own kicks. But I would say rewatching it, like I feel like I have a much different opinion on it now than what I did, like as like a 20-year-old. And I found that to be like the most interesting part of watching it. Like this movie is like pretty shockingly gruesome. Like it's pretty wild. And when I was younger, I was like all about it, and like I didn't really see it as like a feel bad movie. I kind of saw it as like an interesting experiment and like a cool indie drama. But like watching it now, it's just like, damn, this movie is fucked up. This movie was like it goes pretty far.
I do think like again the reason it's NC-17 is because of violence. Like it starts off with just a montage. Like the very first scene is he's talking to a woman and she's like on a train and she's about to leave. And he like grabs her and just strangles her to death, and we see like the full time it takes him to do it, like uncut in the video. And then it cuts immediately to him like shooting everyone he runs into, like a woman, a man, an old lady. You know, and it's kind of like this killer is I mean, he's a serial killer and he's very unapologetically a serial killer. It's almost like he's like there's no ever almost hesitation. Any thoughts or observations he has about his murders always come after the murders. And so there's never like, you know, if you see like the other movie, there's other movies where they like kind of get into the mind of a serial killer. And a lot of times they have that scene where they're like contemplating, like, should I kill this person or not? Even American Psycho has this scene where he's about to kill his secretary and then kind of hesitates. That does not happen in this movie. It's not. There's no sympathy from him, and he doesn't expect any sympathy for him. So
it's like a reflex. He just kills on reflex. Like
and so it's pretty like it's pretty dark. I wouldn't recommend watching this movie if you're not prepared for.
Yeah, it's like kind of an intentionally feel bad, like you said. You're like, oh yeah, this is like, and I don't know. I would say it's almost more interesting conceptually than like when you're like, okay, I get it, but you're also kind of like. You know, you're just kind of along for the ride for like way longer than like you get the point, and then you're like, all right.
I kind of I'm almost like in the opposite of William's take on this, because I remember seeing this. I don't think I was a college kid, although I did think of that too. Like watching this as a college kid, how would you take this? Because when you're in college, like the idea of death isn't like it hasn't really hit you yet, you know. And
like this is like all these murders like don't seem like things that actually happened, or like you know what I mean, or like this. I think the translation for the movie's title in Belgium is like "It Happened Near Your Home" is like the original title, and like like when you're a college kid, like you're exactly right, like you feel invincible still to the world, and you're just like killings happen somewhere else, and like this is all just you can see the humor a lot more than you can see violence.
And see, when I saw this out of college, I kind of like dismissed it as just a cynical like hardcore movie that I'm not a huge fan of, like the ones that are that give no hope. even if like that's kind of the case, yeah.
Yeah, when I was watching this, I was like,
Yeah.
this is anti-Andrew
Like even the
so
ones that I really like,
Andrew
I
does
mean he's
not
now
like.
I think he got canceled for being a pervert. And it's not hard to see, but like Larry Clark who directed Kids, he directed Bully. Maybe one day we'll cover it depending on what his crime was.
Hmm.
And I think he
I
might
didn't know he
have
got
it
canceled,
might just be that he's
but I'm not
generally a
surprised
creep.
either.
But I watch his movies and they are very
Yeah.
well made. They're very dark. They kind of give that glimpse into life that we pretend doesn't exist. But I literally will only
Hmm.
watch them
Yeah.
once and then I have to like watch The Simpsons afterwards because they're so dark that it's kind of like you do want to see that
Yeah.
compelling
Yeah.
story and someone to find the like humanity in these ugly people, but at the same time those people never stop being ugly, and
Hmm.
so it's kind of okay. Like what else are you trying to get? But
Right. You have
I
to kind of
think
just
in this,
accept
and
this.
then when I
Yeah.
watched it again last or this morning, I kind of realized something, and it does because it does get repetitive, but then I think of it, if you look at it from the killer's point of view, that's one thing, but I started to watch it from the camera crew's point of view because the camera crew's following him, and as
Right.
Josh said, they
You
eventually
get
get more involved. And it does, like there was a movie I wanted to
Hmm.
cover next week that I decided against called Joe, directed by John Alverson, who directed Rocky, and it's kind of about conservatives and how you can't like if you know kind of aligned yourself with MAGA, that comes with warts and all. And I think this movie kind of does the same thing where the camera crew, there's like I feel like the camera crew never takes culpability in what they're doing and what they're like at first what they're filming and at second what they end up actually helping with because someone is telling them that that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think especially now, like there's a scene, and I don't know how much we want to get into it, but we're already there, so fuck it. There's a scene later in the movie, almost one of the last
Yeah.
ones, where
Do
he
it.
has a birthday party, and there's this guy kind of hitting on his girlfriend, and his family's there, and the camera crew's there, and then he shoots his girl or the guy like in the face, and like
Yeah.
at
Like,
first
yeah,
nobody
in
knows what
front of
to do,
everybody.
and then the camera team, who's at this point has already been not only watching him murder people constantly but also helping, they just kind of start acting like the party like nothing's changed, and eventually the family members
Right.
and the girlfriend kind of join in, and there's just a dead body but they're acting like they're just pretending the party.
Yeah. They're still having a
Yeah, and I
presence and
think
stuff.
that part is very poignant because it is this thing where, this idea of protesting has now, like, they've beaten it out of us, where you don't, like, if, like, the whole
Yeah.
MAGA, and,
Totally.
like, not to
For
get too
sure.
political, but that whole movement, like, Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, was just convicted of rape. And but it's this thing where it's like, well, that's
Yeah.
not why I voted for him. I voted for him because of economic reasons, and it's like, but he's still a rapist. Like he didn't
Right.
stop being a rapist.
yeah.
He
And
literally just got. He has to pay
yeah.
like $5
And
million
for
to somebody who
the
sexually
people who
assaulted him.
are,
Like
for the
straight up.
Bernie bros in our audience, it's the same thing with Camilla, whatever, Miss Harris. Yes, thank you. I didn't want to mispronounce her name on purpose.
Yeah.
Is that, and that's who I voted for.
White
But it's the
accidentally.
same thing where it's like the people,
Yeah.
they're still funding this, genocide that's happening in Gaza. And so it's kind of like, at what point are you going to start standing up? And I think that it's both that point and
Hmm.
also the point of, I think of a lot of people, it's the same thing where there's that famous case where that woman was yelling rape and or she was being raped and like everyone in the apartment building heard it and no one did anything.
Kitty
It's kind of,
Genovese.
yes, thank you. It's kind of the same thing where
Hmm.
as long as someone's telling you like it's fine, there's a large amount of people who are like, okay,
Yeah.
well it is fine then, And I think that's what, to me,
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're just
go
playing
ahead.
off of. Yeah. Like it's just like whatever you surround yourself with is kind of like just what you're saying, like what you will kind of like fall in line with. Like it's like I think because I'm from like a pretty small conservative town, and I know like a lot of people that did vote for Trump, and like I know that they're just like regular people and everything, and it's like just wherever you are culturally is kind of like where your
Right.
beliefs are going to come from, and it's like if you're constantly surrounded by like other people of a certain political party, it's just like that's what you're automatically going to do because if you're like in a small town, there aren't many other options for
Right.
you to do. Like if you're going to become like this like super liberal person, you're gonna be an outcast, like
Yeah.
not murdered or something, but just like
And I
everyone's gonna think
think,
you're weird.
oh, go ahead.
And like this, like whatever. I feel like that's why the camera crew, like you're saying, they're being told that it's okay what they're doing, and it's like Benoit is also like a total
Mhm.
sociopath and scary. So it's like he also kind of like has like taken them
Right,
hostage
right.
in a way, and so it's like they are getting into it because they're there, but it's like this guy is also like yelling at them that it's okay to do this too, and so it's like his instability is like a major like force behind like why they can't leave. It's kind of like an abusive relationship, you
Yes,
know?
and I think like there's a part near the beginning where he tells him, um, "Hey, oh, where you find out that Benoit has been funding these guys." And it becomes this thing where you realize that
Yeah,
like they have um so it is that thing where he is kind of holding them hostage because they can't make anything if they don't get funding, and he's agreed to fund them, and it slowly becomes
yeah,
like they get more and more into this idea. But I think like it
yeah,
is that thing where like again, I think there was a lot of people who voted the way they did because they're upset with the fact that everything is super expensive now. Nothing works. And
Right.
with the
yeah,
the like it's not so much, oh, I mean there's a bunch of people who just didn't vote at all. There's a bunch of people who voted for Trump just like trying to get some kind of change. And again, like it's hard to, and I
yeah,
think that's why there was also that huge response to Luigi because again, Luigi Moscone killed the CEO. It's like I don't think anyone was like, hell yeah, killing's right. Like, I love killing. It's more so that as soon as that happened,
right,
almost everyone in the country of the United States was reminded of a time that the healthcare system screwed you over. And so it's that thing where it's
right,
like, oh, well,
right,
this guy's offering some kind of change, even if it's in this
Right.
yeah,
impossible way. And it's the same thing where like he starts off by being very friendly with them, he's paying for them, even if what he's doing is grotesque. And I think
hmm,
another great point about this is when he's like talking, it's all very nice, it's all very serviceable. He's like, hey, how like, oh yeah, one time, yeah,
he's
one time I
smart
went
and
over
funny
there
and
and I did
charming.
this and
Yeah,
um and he's like murdering. Like he's like
he
waiting
seems like
for
a
a
normal
lady to
guy.
die.
Yeah,
And or like there's a
right,
part where he kills like a night watchman and he realizes the watchman is a African American migrant. And he's like talking about like, oh, I can't believe this country would treat this guy so bad. Like you probably can't get another job. And it's like, A, you just killed him. And then B, he also
right,
is
Right.
like he says
yeah,
that the company only hired him because he would be too hard to see because he's black. And it's like so he's like kind of
right.
like saying, "Oh, hey."
He's like every
It's
opinion.
like and
He's on
again, I
every
think
side of
that makes
every
it poignant
spectrum.
because he's not saying you never get an idea that he's saying necessarily what he believes as much as he's saying like something he maybe heard somewhere and just wants to repeat. And I think
Right,
that that's a
right.
very smart choice because it makes him not his own person. It makes him like he's this killer who's trying to do this, but like he's so desperate for like attention and for like wanting
Yeah,
to be like liked in a way. And so
Yeah,
it's like
because there's even the
right.
scene where like they're gonna go like, well, we're done filming, we need to go, and he's like, well, no, come on, let's like go have a drink, like let's just like
Yeah, do you guys
hang
want to
out a
party?
little bit more,
Yeah.
Or they're like, no, like we're done.
And he starts getting more
yeah.
mad when they
Yeah.
say no. Like he just like tells he's just like he's like the friend who like gets like who like seems like they're like seething mad like under the
Yeah.
surface and it just makes them seem more unstable and it's like are we gonna be friends after this or are you gonna follow me
Right,
home?
right.
Like who are you? It's like just he's very eerie but also like you can't like he did such a good job in this movie. He's like completely you can't take your eyes off of him. He's like
Yeah.
electric. And so it's like you want to watch him and like you want to see where this documentary is going to go, but at the same time, it's like he's so scary in like this very realistic way. He's not like scary and like yelling and screaming at people. He's scary in like how we're saying, like just very human. And he says all these little sound bites that kind of sound familiar, and you're like, what is this guy's philosophy? But it's close enough to a real philosophy that he seems like just a regular guy, but then he does a good job of just like putting those cracks in his personality where you're like, no, this guy is psychotic and this guy will kill whoever the hell he wants at any point in time, which is really
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
I feel like they did a really good
Yeah,
job
and
with
I
that.
think they do
Yeah.
a good job of like really not making him likable, like keeping things so that he's just this kind of like id, like he's just like he's just
Right.
like like a mental, like he acts on instinct on everything, and it's an interesting way to look at it.
Hmm.
And especially like 1992, we're still kind of making like the serial killer is always the bad guy, so to kind of come up with this one where maybe not
Hmm.
sympathetic, but at least he's the protagonist for sure. um I do want,
Yeah.
like, it is interesting. I would be curious as to what film Twitter would think about this movie, because it's
Oh man,
like,
I mean, child death,
Yeah.
sexual assault,
and I
film
think
Twitter would
like
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's that thing where
Yeah.
some movies aren't meant to be watched like a bunch of times. Some movies are literally just like, here's a thesis, like here's like he really wants to get his point.
Yeah.
Like, even like, I think again, like Larry Clark does a lot of those movies where you don't want to watch them again, but you're glad that you saw them to see that kind of perspective.
Yeah, no, and I think it's
Hmm.
definitely one of those like, oh, you will not like enjoy watching this, even if you like respect it. You'll be like, oh, this is tough.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think, like, I don't know, what did you guys think of? Did you think it had anything to say about the media in general, or do you think that was just kind of a way to like tell the story? Because I know that they came up with this idea because they were making a real documentary, and they're like, "Oh man, it'll be kind of cheap and easy to do if we did this." Yeah.
Just do this murder
But
shit.
what did you think?
I mean, I thought that it definitely did. I feel like that sort of that was always like always so weird about documentaries. Like growing up and like we went to film school and everything, and like I took this class of documentaries, and they're always talking about like like the line that you can't cross. So like you have to just be the total observer. You can't, like, if you do anything to help or hurt the person, you're like changing the rules, and you're now influencing is what I'm looking for. You're influencing this person's life, but you're also influencing them by making a documentary. And you had to convince this person to do a documentary, which is also very manipulative in a way. And you're going to expose this person to the world, which is a very vulnerable thing to do. And so it's like the idea of just like filming somebody and be a total fly on the wall is just like completely
Yeah.
impossible. And I feel like watching this movie is kind of like a mockumentary as like how they become totally involved in these killings was kind of, it was like instead of them manipulating Benoit kind of like manipulated the
Right.
filmmakers, which was kind of like an interesting twist on that. But like I love that idea of where does real life end or whatever, and like where does the documentary begin? Like I've always found that to be like, I love documentaries, but like I feel like it'd be so hard to make one because I feel like that's the main rule, to not influence what you're filming is just completely
Yeah,
impossible to
and I
do.
think in the nature
Yeah.
of documentary, it's hard because I always like, there's always going to be a point where it's like, what do I serve more, the narrative or the truth? And even if it's a small
Right,
band,
exactly.
documentary is more so than anything else, more so than any piece of factual information like that, is going to be the most biased. But I think, like,
Yeah.
I think that that's like a good thing to kind of look at. And I think the way that they're portrayed, like where at first they're just getting good shots, and then he's kind of helping them, like, oh, can you move your head this way? And then, like, at one point they're like looking through, because he also robs everyone he murders, and so they're looking through someone's apartment, and the
Right.
guys are like, hey, look at this! Like, we found this kind of wacky table, and so it becomes this thing where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, they're just kind of helping, and then they're like, and then at one point he goes and kills the family, and the kid runs out, and he's like, well, go get him. And so they go, but like, there's like,
Yeah.
it's very seamless when it goes from they're doing this because he told them to, and they're doing this because they're doing this. And I think that that's
Yeah.
really how it goes. Like, 1 minute you're voting for reality star, and the next minute you're like pissing on AOC's desk because he told you to storm the Capitol. And like, there's
Right.
not, like, if
Right.
you look at those people, it was like dental hygienists, and it's like that guy, when he was in dental school, he probably wasn't like, oh, I'm definitely gonna be breaking federal laws and be committed of treason soon. But
Right.
like, you go
Yeah.
down that rabbit hole, you
Can't wait.
surround yourself with these kind of people.
I also think
and I
like, and they don't make a big deal
Yeah.
about the money in this one, but I mean, I would say that is like, I mean, that is something where like they mention it, and it's enough to kind of inform like why are they essentially kind of going along with this in the first place. But I would say like in real life that is probably the hugest factor. Like I don't know if you ever saw the where there were two big Fire Festival documentaries released at the
Mhm.
same time, and one was like
Oh yeah,
basically
yeah,
funded
yeah,
by the guys who put on Fire Festival and one
Yeah.
wasn't. And you could clearly see which one was
yeah.
more critical and which one was more like they were in over their heads. It was a big
Yeah.
mistake. You know, it's just like
Right,
yes, it's like
right,
they're
right.
they're gonna, edit and like frame it from the lens of like, well, how do we want this to come off to the investors? You
Yeah.
know, like and
Right. How do we show that this was an accident versus the other people who are like, how are we going to show
to
this
And
say
is all
like
scheming?
nothing of like, oh, is this entertaining enough to get bought by like Netflix or whatever? And I don't know if that was really the case of how you would do a documentary in like the 90s, but I assume you're always trying to sell it to someone to get some sort
yeah.
of distribution,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
totally.
like
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
gonna say at any point in the movie industry, the point was
you're trying to
always to
sell your
sell it.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I think like I almost kind of applaud them because the three of them, and it's funny because they're all documentary filmmakers. They all wrote and directed this film, so they know kind of what they're doing. But the three of them decide to kind of turn the lens. Like you would think in a movie like this, the satire of the media would be on the media as a whole, but it seems to be on like documentaries in particular. Like
Like
how much
conceptually. Yeah.
responsibility do you have for what you're
Yeah.
filming? I know, like and the news, it's not as bad, but there was like times where like family members would go up to you and be like, please don't show my son, even sometimes when I was like, please don't show my house, it just caught on fire. And it's like, okay, but what is the responsibility? Like, how much do the people of this city need to know that this house is on fire as opposed to a house is on fire?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, what difference does that location
Oh,
change?
right,
And I think,
right.
like,
When you worked
yes,
for
you
the
were finished.
news, I totally missed what I was like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? But no, you were
Yeah.
there all the time.
You were the night
totally
crawler.
in
You were
that.
Jake
I was,
Gyllenhaal
yeah.
and the
And
night
Yeah,
crawler.
dude.
there was
You were
also
out there
that time
influencing
that I followed that
documentaries.
serial killer around, but different results. Yeah.
Every night
You
for
know
months.
what
I was like, this is fun, guys.
Yeah, this guy's cool.
What this movie kind of like loses is kind of the ending, and I mean, whatever, you're either gonna watch it or not by this point, so go watch. It's on HBO Max.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because like it does kind of get more and more surreal. Like you kind of mentioned, like pretty late on, where he like kills someone in front of his family, and then they just don't react, and then he like gets arrested because one of his victims gets away, but then he easily like escapes. And then you're almost like, okay, like this is just gonna end with him like doing his thing. But then they're kind of like, oh, by the way, you accidentally killed some Italian mobsters, so the Italian mob's coming after you. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this doesn't feel like
Right,
related
right.
to
Well,
anything.
and see, because that's a scene,
For a while, I lost the
and I
plot
will
for
say,
sure.
like, I did want to bring up that scene because there is one scene where he kind of critiques the media as a whole, and it's the scene where he finds the gangster. So they go back to his warehouse, and he finds this, like, someone starts shooting at him, and so he starts shooting back, and then he finally catches them. And then you realize that it's a gangster, and he's also being followed around by a
Yeah.
film crew. And I think that scene is kind of the only one where he's saying, like, this is where media is heading. It's kind of moving towards this kind of super violent way.
Yeah, and we all
No, and
can't
that
get
is a
enough of
good
it.
scene because then that's
In fact,
But
there's two
I
productions
think like
happening.
his metaphor, like that metaphor ends up not hitting as hard because now we know it's like, oh, actually, you don't need to be killing people for camera crew to be following you. All you need to do is be super annoying and call yourself Jake Paul, and you'll have millions of people just watching you
Right.
for hours a day.
Yeah.
And I think like because that scene doesn't work as much because it's not as poignant anymore. You also like that scene kind of builds up into the ending when those Russian or Italian mobsters are getting revenge on
Yeah.
him. And I think like it does kind of feel like so much of this movie has been him like unharmed. And I don't mind the ending, but I think just it should have I would have rather had it been more ambiguous, like just a random, like it's never clear who shot him or who
yeah. To me, it's
Maybe it could have been any
Mhm.
story.
it's more like like eventually someone would kill him when you're like killing people, or it's just like the idea of a serial killer will always exists, so he never gets harmed or whatever. It's like that would have been fine, but the fact that it's specifically like, oh, you shouldn't have made the mob mad, it's like what
Yeah.
like that's just
Yeah.
Well,
that's just
and-
such a
Like, this
weird
movie was
note
not
to
about crime.
end on
It,
for
and
like
it
this
is
movie
true.
about.
Like
like
the
this-
mob didn't like those kind of
You shouldn't make
yeah.
them mad.
The mob didn't like those kind of murders because it draw too much attention. But I don't know. It's just such a weird like. Oh, okay. You know, like,
Yeah, like
Yeah,
why
here you go,
this?
that was it.
You know?
yeah.
Right.
It would be
Right.
like if you did a movie like in Mexico and it's like a Mexican story, and then at the very end the cartels kill everyone. It's like, well, I mean, they do that, but it's random. Like,
Yeah. And
Right.
also
Right.
just
Right.
like in a way where like the police can't catch him and no one knows who he is, and it's like, oh, but then the mob like learns everything about him and starts
well,
hunting his
because he
family.
goes on trial. That's how they find out.
I thought they like get out of it. Now, yeah, I guess you're
No,
right. It would have been
he
like
goes on
public.
trial, and then he goes to jail, and then he escapes somehow. They don't really explain how.
Yeah,
He just
that's
calls
right.
them. He's like,
And then they find him on
they're
the
like, come
road.
pick me up, and then they just kind of walk out. But I assume that Italian prisons are very
Yeah.
easy to get out of.
This is Belgium, but
I assume every prison that's not in America.
Oh, I
any
see.
European
Yeah.
prison
Those Belgian
whatsoever.
prisons, they ain't
From
nothing. Yeah.
every movie I've seen about someone ending up in an East European prison, they're always having a great time that they can just leave.
Yeah.
But it's
Catch
but
me
like
if you
but like
can.
to me
It's a
it's
good
like
one.
like you know the ending of No Country where he gets hit by a car and the idea is like, oh, no matter what you try to control, violence will like find you, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's chaos.
Yeah.
It's like that
totally.
almost makes more sense for this movie than kind of the point A to B like mob stuff that just doesn't really even fit in the media criticism.
Yeah,
to me.
because almost
like it's
up
almost too
until-
realistic for how surreal the movie is,
Almost
you know?
up until
Right.
this-
Organized crime is too much of another subject.
up until this point, nobody that he's ever killed has ever like come back. Like you never hear like in American
Yeah.
Psycho, almost that whole movie's about Paul Allen and like finding him. You know, like they talk about
Mhm.
like a bunch of people that he's murdered and like trying to look for them and like in most movies that's how it is. But in this one, it's like after he kills you, like that's it. And so because he's
Yeah.
just killing strangers, really. I do like he also likes to kill mailmen like a lot.
Because they're carrying
Yeah.
goods, like,
That's what
He
gets him in
carried a
trouble.
lot of good.
'Cause one of them
But like
got-
then the movie's called
yeah.
Man Bites Dog, and I was like at the point when they named it in English where they like, yeah, he hates mailmen. Let's put dog in the title.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But so like you have so like for the Italian mob to come back, it just kind of feels like that's not what you had been saying so far.
You're breaking the reality of the movie,
Right,
and
right.
it does almost feel like one of those like, well, how do we end this type of
Yeah.
things, you know?
But
I mean, I feel like Benoit should have gotten away, and the crew just dies,
see,
and then like that last shot could have been Benoit running away, maybe,
I
because it's like he's too untouchable.
see, but I kind of like because there's this scene where like the mob kills his entire family, and there's this scene where he goes and finds his
Mhm.
daughter, his girlfriend, and she's been violently killed, and her body's been like abused. And then you find out later that they did the same thing to the mother. And the fact that I'm only listing the
Yeah.
women should tell you what kind of abuse her bodies were put under.
Yeah.
And he's crying. Like, it's a very long scene. He's crying. He likes holding her head. And when he finds his mother, he does the same thing. Like, he kind of gets mad at the guys, like, really, really mad at them for the first time. And it's this thing where it's like, it's that reality of like, oh, it was okay when I was doing it, but now that it's being done to me,
Mhm.
it's a completely different. And so I do like that kind of thing.
Right.
I think it's better that he dies at the end, just because of the fact that it's like this was kind of in the same way Uncut Gems ends, where it's like there was no other, like, even if he had lived in the end of this movie, he's going to die eventually because he's just so brazen and so
Right.
loose. And so I like kind of it.
He can't be stopped.
Yeah, it's that thing where it's like if you live in this world of violence, there's no escape from it. Like you don't get to recite
Yeah.
a poem and then leave, you know. But
Totally.
I do
Yeah.
still think like, and I guess like the only way for someone to have found the family and to murder them is if it had been the mob, because it'd be hard
Right,
to
they would
like
have the
believe it was
connection.
like the
Oh, right.
kid's family.
Yeah.
you know?
Right. No, I understand
Yeah,
like
yeah.
logistically. I just feel like the movie's so a surreal like metaphor for the media that it almost is like almost too realistic to kind of be backgrounded for like
Right.
the final like
Yeah.
moments of the movie, you know?
Yeah, and it's also like it's pretty dialed in because the camera's like strangely on his head like the whole time, and like we've never really had a
During the
close
end?
up. Yeah, right when he's reciting that
Yeah.
poem, it's like
I
right
know,
here,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like
It's
okay,
like way more intimate.
Yeah.
It's a very Cloverfield style, like, all right, this is
Yeah, we
something's
gotta-
gonna
this
happen,
is
and the
the end,
camera has to be
guys.
at this
Yeah.
point of view. That's right.
I
Watch
know,
this
I
and
know.
Cloverfield as your double feature
Yeah.
of camera movies.
Yeah.
But I think overall, I think it's an interesting movie. I think people should watch it, especially like kind of,
Yeah.
especially now that so much of, like I said, I kind of touched on this, the Jake Paul thing, but so much of our lives is, I mean, what we're doing now, 20 years ago, the idea of three filmmakers like talking about films for like strangers was unheard of. Like that just wouldn't happen unless we're at a film festival or an event.
Right.
But now it's just such an ingrained part of our lives that it doesn't even seem weird. And so this is
Yeah.
kind of like, it is kind of funny to be like, one of the questions of this movie is like, well, what if a camera was following you around? It's like literally it is. It's doing that all the time.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
especially like with the fact that him being so, and I think there's like with our generation, there's such a kind of a narcissism to the future and to the way we think of things. Maybe because
Yeah.
we're like in a
Sure.
genocide, and just over Christmas there was like 5 mass shootings where they're trying to kill. Some of them were trying to kill
Right.
Trump. Some of them weren't trying to kill Trump. Some were trying to kill for Trump, and it's like this is just the world we're in now, where it's just a violent one.
And these things like barely even phase anybody
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah,
It's just
and
like we were talking about this, and I was like, if this house like blows up on our walk with the dogs, like that's gonna be the least interesting thing that happens to me in 2025. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
it's just
right.
like everything is just so wild that I just feel like numb, kind of. Like I'm worried, but I'm like, oh no, another huge disaster.
Right, you're
Yeah.
worried in a way where you're like, ugh, like more like sighing about it than like
Right.
scared.
And it's,
You're like,
Yeah.
all right.
and it's this real weird world where, like, regardless of what happened, the Democrats ran on this idea that like Trump was a fascist and that he's going to bring about the end of our democracy. Which we'll see what happens. But as soon as
I
they
hope not.
as soon as they lost, like there was that email that went out being like, "Hey, we just lost to Trump. We need your donations now more than ever." And to me, I was like, I thought this
Yeah.
guy was gonna fucking end the world. What the fuck? You need more money for what? I thought that was it. Like,
Yeah.
was it just
Yeah.
a battle that we lost?
We lost.
And so it's this weird thing where
It's all
like
going down.
that. One of the things that really stuck with me is him kind of doing this horrific acts and always act like it's never the most interesting part of his conversation, according to him. The stuff he's talking about
Yeah.
is like the cool stuff, but the fact that he's murdering an old lady while he's talking about it is like consequential. And I think like there's so many people who think like that, but it's like this movie kind of like puts it in your face on how wrong that kind of thinking is, and how like no, you should probably think about other people even if you don't know them, even if you want to kill
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
It's a way of kind of like showing you eventually where that cynicism gets you. And I think it's interesting. So I definitely would recommend watching it. But
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, no,
And it's beautifully shot. It's like a very interesting moral quandary in a way, and like it's an indie film, but it's like they were very talented filmmakers, and like nothing ever like they keep the tone really well honed.
yeah.
So like whenever the crew starts getting into the killings, it feels like natural, like we were saying. It doesn't feel like forced. And it does have a lot of interesting things to say about like why we like to watch violence, and like how far are we willing to go as an audience to like accept something as like entertaining versus like when
Right.
do you turn it, like I heard like one reviewer was talking about like he like ended his little review saying like at the end of this movie I couldn't stop watching it, but like I wish I had. And like that's how like the film crew probably felt, is like they were just getting too into it. They got caught up in the storm, and by the end, if they'd done these atrocious things, it's like they probably wish they hadn't done it, but like they did, and now they have to just live with that. And like it makes the audience like I felt pretty bad after this movie watching it. Like as an adult, I just felt like, yeah, like that was a bummer. That was
yeah, yeah, no,
that
it
was so
definitely will
gross,
bum you out. Yeah.
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 You won't be like cool. You'll be like,
But
oh,
I
Right.
think there is that thing, and especially again now, you see a lot of it, and where if a movie's depressing, like it's not worth watching. And I know, like, I mean, things are depressing, so I understand that sentiment. Like, last year I was
Yeah.
like, I don't want to watch anything depressing. But I think there's
Yeah.
also an argument to be made, and this one makes a good one for like a movie isn't always going to be something that you watch a million times that you really love. It could be
Totally.
something that's very well done that you do love and that you never want to see again
Yeah.
because of
It's,
what
it's
it's
challenging.
Yeah, like some movies should
Yeah.
be like there was this guy on Twitter today to show how obsessed I am with Twitter. It's my third time referencing it. And he was talking about how like the reason that people don't read classic literature is because the books are too hard to read. And as someone who's been trying to read more classic literature, they are hard to read but that's
Yeah.
kind of the point of like reading
Yeah.
them. Like Bernie
Like, why was it written
Sinalis,
that way back
yeah,
then?
he's hard to like. And I've never disparaged anyone for reading something, but you can read like Stephen King in like 2 days. You cannot
Yeah.
read like 1984 in 2 days because you're like it's a lot to absorb. And
Yeah.
that's not to
Yeah.
say like you should read this one and not read this one or vice versa. It's just to say that like what Stephen King is trying to get out of you and what 1984 is trying to get out of you are not the same thing. So you cannot treat them the same. In the same way, like Deadpool
Right.
versus Wolverine is not trying to do what Man Bites Dog is trying to do, but that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that one of them is invaluable to our society. It just means that they're trying to get different things. And that's why,
Yeah.
like, when we talk about is this movie success, that's why I think a lot of the times, like movies that are reviewed badly, it's like if you're not thinking about what that movie's trying to achieve, you're discrediting itself. You know, you're discrediting yourself
Right,
and
right.
the movie because you're not trying to engage it with the work of art it is. You're trying to engage it by how you want that work of art to be.
Yeah.
That's not
Right,
what
right.
it's going to be.
You want it to go in like a different direction. Yeah, I actually
Yeah.
saw this movie for the first time like a few months ago. It was just one of those random,
Huh.
like, oh, this has been on my list. I know nothing about it. Let me just put it on at work. And,
Nice.
what a mistake. I was like, oh
Yeah.
no, this is one of those. So
Yeah.
I do feel like it is good to like be in the right mindset for it to like engage with something like specifically as like a like art criticism, not like like Deadpool, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, hey, Ryan Reynolds was in Buried, which is kind of a feel-bad commentary on the Iraq War.
Oh yeah,
so,
Buried was
Yeah.
good.
Buried was
you know,
We should do
And
Buried
Buried
someday.
Buried's another movie that we saw it once. I thought it was very well done. I thought it was very good, and I never want to see that movie.
yeah, like it just makes you
Yeah,
feel dead
same.
inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the
Yeah.
last time I remember Ryan Reynolds being in a movie that's not just like him being himself, like pushing stuff,
Right.
you know, like an ad.
Yeah.
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 A real Ryan Reynolds performance.
Yeah. I
Go
mean,
back to
it's-
that, Ryan. Stop
Oh,
making.
Josh, you didn't see
Come
Red
on.
Notice?
I did see Red Notice.
Oh,
I
I
thought
guess
you were
you
gonna
forgot.
say.
I
I
guess-
thought you were
I
gonna
guess
say
you
Red
forgot.
One,
It's the
and I
real-
realized
I
that
was
Chris
I was
Evans.
gonna say Red One, and then I realized that
They are
he's
the
not
same
in
movie,
Red.
though. You'll get
Yeah,
the same
different
thing out
movie.
of both of them.
Yeah,
Nothing.
you'll get two classics. You'll get two classic
Yeah.
films.
Yeah. You get
That
two
are-
back-to-back good times.
That two classic films that if you watch them back to back, you could probably watch Man Bites Dog like 8 times in that runtime because they're both like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
For some reason. But yeah, well, thank you guys. Thanks for joining us as usual. Go watch Man Bites Dog. It's on Max, and we're gonna return next week with one of the epic films of American cinema. So wait until you see that.
This
And
is
then, of
this is going to
course-
be a feel good movie, but only for me.
Yeah. But then, of
Oh.
course, we'll also have our year-end review, so get on that. If you have any movies that you want to comment, hey, you should see this beforehand, let us know. And, of course, give us a like and subscribe. I'm going to start saying that in 2025, like and subscribe.
Yeah. Resolution. Yeah.
But, yeah, so check us out. Thanks for everything, and we'll see you guys next week on The Bomb Squad.